Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Shyamala here. She is one of our mentors at Springboard, and Emily and Fabio will go ahead and interview her. So without further ado, Shyamala, if you'd love to give an introduction, that would be great.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Shyamala Prayaga, and I'm a UX designer. I have almost 17 years of experience working on mobile web desktop-based applications. And starting in 2015, I started working on voice interactions and voice-based application, starting with Amazon Echo, and worked with a couple of voice companies. And currently, I'm working with Ford for their in-car voice experience and stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're really excited to have you on. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found your way into UX and why you chose UX as a career?
Yeah, sure. So that's an interesting question, because I didn't even knew 17 years back there is something called user experience and design, because that term was not even there. So I did my academia in civil engineering, and then I used to work as an architect, designing the houses and stuff. Somehow when I was doing that, I felt like, I understand user needs, and I felt like I have empathy for users, what they want and stuff. But my career was not letting me do that, and I was not feeling satisfied about it. So then I decided I have to make a move and I have to do something big and better. And then, I decided to do the user experience design, chose user experience as my career. Back then, UX was not even a term. So people used to call it human-computer interactions, usability, and all of these different kind of things. So I somehow made my way, doing just those kind of things, and got opportunity to work with various different kind of companies where I learned while on being on job, what to do, what process to follow, and things like that. And slowly, made my way.
Awesome. Great to hear that. So, that's interesting because, so in those first companies, right, some of your first experiences playing around with UX, what were some of your major difficulties getting started? What were some of the most difficult things there?
I would say the process. There was no set process saying, this is how you have to do a user-centered design. So it was really difficult, how should I start with research, and how do I define who my users are? Personas were not even a thing back then. So I really had a lot of difficult time communicating my design ideas and stuff like that to the stakeholders, because back then everyone was fighting with the technology, like how to make technology work. So for them, it was an engineering driven mindset more than, being a design driven mindset. So that was the biggest difficult thing for me, trying to get that thing into place.
Awesome. So is there anything that as you were starting off your career, if you could go back and do differently that you would have done?
Very interesting question. So yeah, I was working on this project many years back, almost 13, 14 years back, which was a document management system. And back then, it was a very complicated project. The company had a lot of needs in terms of, making it rich internet application, lot of features and all. And that project went through 3 years of iteration, back and forth, because first the company chose one technology, then they said, no, this will not work. Then they chose the second technology because the design we were creating was not, user-centered. So if I were to go back and, correct that thing, I would say I would follow a proper user-centered design process like how we do. I would have a more data-driven approach where I would bring, what would work for the users, what is the right thing to do. Instead of having too many things, let's break it down into small pieces and do, steps and, step by step, like MVP model and stuff like that. So I would definitely do something like that if given a chance.
Awesome. Interesting to hear. So, you've been in the field for a while, and now you're working on voice interfaces, which is just something really cool, right? You've got the Echo, all the companies are releasing their own products in the industry. It's very exciting. So throughout your career, what would you say was the single most challenging project you ever worked on?
For a UX designer, I would say every project is a challenge.
But no,
But
that's cheating. You gotta pick one. You gotta pick one.
yeah,
Single
so
number one.
I would tell you about a project which is really interesting because it was challenging. The product manager came to me and said, we are working on this Amazon seller support product, and all you have to do is change couple of fields and add. So it was like, it was called Anden card. Okay. And the idea was like, if you have a problem as a customer, you would call Amazon customer service, right? And then what happens is the customer support would call back and say like, okay, what is your problem? And you would say, I have this product which has not been delivered to me. What do I do? And stuff like that. So what happens as a customer, you are on this end, but on the other end, there is a person taking your calls and, answering your queries and stuffs. The same thing for seller is a way more difficult thing because, there, what happens is if you said like, the customer bought this product and the delivery shows it has been delivered, but the customer is saying, I never received that product. So imagine what happened, who is lying, customer is lying, or, things like that. So for that, someone developed a product called Anden Card. This product was like, I need help. So in the customer support, let's say there's an associate, the associate is not able to answer the calls. So now he wants supervisor to help them. So, they would go to the supervisor and say, I need help. So for that, the first process was they used to have a flag and they used to say, I need help. So, they wanted to automate that thing. So they created Anden card, which was like way too complicated. So the product manager comes to me and says, hey, this is the product. Can you please add 4 additional fields into this? Because we want to collect some data around some of these things. I went back and I saw the product. It was way too complicated and too many fields. So the thing was like, technically I was supposed to just add 4 fields and then make it look good and give it to them. Now, I saw a lot of potential in terms of time, how much time the associate is taking to create an Anden card. And then I saw like how much money the company is losing in terms of this entire thing in terms of time. And I was like, no, I cannot just, add these 4 fields and give it to you and say like, no, I'm done. I wanted to do something more. I was like, okay, so now what should I do? I went back and I told the product manager, like, this looks like a much bigger problem than what you're asking me to do. So the product manager was like, never mind, don't worry about all these things. You just add what I asked you to do. I'm like, no, I'm a UX designer. I don't think that way. So then what I did was like, I said, fine. I went to my manager. I told him, look, this problem is bigger than what you think. I want to do research. I want to collect data. I want to solve this problem in a better way. So then the manager said, fine. Then I went to the associate, the call center, and I saw people, taking calls, requesting Anden cards. I saw people, how they are doing things. And there were so many problems, so many challenges. Like one call used to take 20-25 minutes where, the customer is on hold for such a long time. And one associate is on hold for such a long time because he doesn't have the answer to most of the question. He has to go through a lot of, hierarchy and stuffs. And then I did contextual inquiry. I spoke to associates. I spoke to supervisors. I had a lot of data and their pain points and stuffs. I came back. I created a case. I created some solutions around those things. I went back to my product manager and I said, look, this is what you asked me. You asked me to add 3-4 additional form fields. I did that, right? But it is not giving us any benefit. It is not giving any benefit. Whatever we are doing is all good. But hey, I have an alternate solution. I went back to the support and, I collected some data. They have these pain points. They have these challenges. And, with all of these, every associate is taking 20 minutes. To request an Anden card, it is taking minimum 20 seconds. We can optimize the process to 2 seconds. And I told him the solutions. And I'm like, now option is yours. I gave you 2 options. You choose which one you want. So then they got a little surprised seeing that data and they were like, oh, wow, this is nice. And then they were like, okay, but we don't have budget for the second one, like redesigning the entire thing. And I'm like, you're not redesigning, you're just adding one button in the existing tool and you're just making the process more simpler. So then it went to the VP approval and all of those people. And then, they all felt like, yes, this is helping us much more than what the earlier design, proposed design was. So the management agreed, and I was able to launch that product. So, what I like about this project, being challenging was one thing. The second thing was, I was able to push my design idea, which I really wanted the users to use.
Man, that's a really good example of
Absolutely.
like how UX can completely get solve different problems that you didn't even expect to, and uncover, open a can of worms.
Exactly.
And just jumping on there, you were talking about the PM and the relationship, and how that can affect the how they can affect the project in a negative way, kind of move it away from a more user-centered design. And I was thinking of some of my past projects where that happened. It's just like, yeah, exactly that. It's very common.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, good to hear that. Emily, you wanna go?
Yeah, sure. Could you tell us a little bit about how the teams that you currently work with are structured? And are you the only designer? Do you work with other designers? How do you work with the people that you work with?
Yeah, so we have a design manager, and we are like 5 or 6 different designers working on different part of the in-car experience, the in-car HMI which we have. So I'm working on 4 projects, and the structure is we are like 5-6 designers, and we have an advanced research team. And the research team is where all the dedicated researchers are. We go to the researcher and we say, hey, we're looking for a data like this, or we want to collect data around some of these. So let me give you an example. Now that I'm working on voice experience, it's really important for me to understand how the voice interface should work and stuff like that. So I partner with the research team. I tell them can I get some data on the existing car experience and how people use voice in the car, what problems they have, what challenges they have, and also how the interface works and stuff like that. So they do all the research based on what data I'm looking for, and they come back with the data like this is what we found and stuff like that. So based on those data, I try to design the solutions. So in addition to the advanced research team, we also have a UX team, a separate UX team, which is like the moonshot team. They are the UX strategist, and they are the ones who would come and feed in more data saying this is where the technology is going and this is what our strategy should be, and maybe we should be thinking about these kind of features down the line of few years. So now I have to balance all of those things with the current releases and what we are planning. I have to work with the UX moonshot team, and I have to work with the researchers and then the development team and everyone, and make sure the product is in sync and delivered on time.
Awesome. So can you tell us about some of the most recent features or parts of the product that you've worked on, or a current project that you might be working on?
Right. So I'm working on something called over-the-air updates for the car. So now, this is very challenging, first of all, because it's in the car and it needs connectivity. So, there are a lot of challenges in terms of connectivity and when should the update happen and things like that. So over-the-air update is like, let's say you have the in-car HMI. So you want to push some kind of features like, a new radio or a new, interface has been added into the car. Now you want to push that somehow. That is not how car used to work back in the days. You had a car, and what you would do is you will use it for 5-6 years. It became old. Now you'll buy a new one with the latest technology and features. Now the trend has changed. We want our car to be up to date always, and that's where over the air update comes into play. So with the over the air update, the biggest challenge is there are a lot of software updates happening, and it can take hours and days and months for the update to happen. And it all depends on you should have enough battery, you should have enough connectivity, you should have enough power, your vehicle should not be in drive mode, and a lot of challenges are there with this feature itself. So I'm working on this where how do I make that experience seamless for the user, that they don't have any problem with any of these, but we are taking care of all the heavy lifting and updates and stuffs. So it's really challenging, and I'm having fun doing that.
Interesting. So clearly this is not just a one-person job, right? It seems to be a really complex project. And again, just rethinking how people interact with cars. I mean, that must be tricky, to say the least. So when you're hiring people to work on your team on voice, how do you do that? What do you look for? Because I mean, I have a portfolio, but it doesn't communicate that I could handle like a voice interface. So what do you look for? How do you find people? How do you interview them? Just kind of walk us through your process there.
So for me, the biggest thing would be, the person should have a data-driven approach first, because, data takes you a long way. The second thing I would be looking for me in the portfolio, it's not about, the pretty pictures and all these big images and stuff. It's all about how did you solve a problem. So the way I explained my Anden card, I would be looking for people with that kind of approach where they are thinking outside the box, or they are trying to solve a problem with proper process in place. So most of the students who I interact with, they start with, oh, my capstone project will be a mobile application, right? That's not the approach. Your approach should be, this is my problem, this is what I was thinking, and based on the solution, it can become a non-technical project. Maybe it was an offline thing, something you designed like a board game or something like that, right? It can go to any direction, but the thing is the mindset like with which people come is like, I have this. So I would be looking for designers who have a proper process in place. I don't care about end-to-end design, but I would care about just pick one feature and explain me how did you solve that feature? What was the process? How did you convince your stakeholders about, this is the feature, this is what we should be doing, and things like that. Because most of the time when you're working in any company, you might end up working on, not just a project end to end, but you would be working on just part of that. So how are you able to do that is really important.
Awesome.
Have you seen any like really good examples of that? Or have any of your students been able to execute that really well? Or in your process of hiring people, have you bookmarked anybody's that you could share?
Yeah, so I don't have bookmarks, but I would say like I had this one candidate. So when I was interviewed with Amazon, I would give you that example first. When I was interviewed with Amazon, they did not ask me which project or which feature. They said redesign an airport, which has nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with, mobile application or desktop application, because they wanted to see how I define the process. So once I had a candidate and I asked him, okay, if you have to, design a swimming pool experience, how would you do that? When this person started, what I liked was he asked me like a lot of questions. He asked me like, is this a new swimming pool, or are you planning to redesign it? What is the budget? And then, is it like commercial use or personal use, or what is the purpose? Is it a part of a resort, or is it an individual swimming pool? He asked me the right kind of questions before jumping into the design and, doing something. After that, he considered what kind of users will be using the swimming pool. There are adults, there are kids. So, you cannot have one size fit to all. So how do I design for, like kids as well as, adults? And then how do I make it usable for everyone? How do I also add the pleasure and, fun aspect to it, like having some kind of shape? So without jumping into the solution, this person, his name was Neil, and he's a great designer, one of the great designer, I would say. He started with that approach, and after that approach, he kind of took me through his journey about how would he design the swimming pool experience. And I was amazed by the attention to detail he had about things. Like for kids, I would have a depth level would be less, and for adults I would have a more higher depth level. I would add some kind of animal shape for the kids to have fun. For adults I would have this. For security I would add this. So he was thinking about every use case, when you are interacting with the swimming pool, like when you are in the swimming pool. So that experience is what I would be looking for. Like, how do you solve that problem? Like ask the questions and have the right set of process in place. Like I would talk to these people, I would ask for these kind of things, I would get approvals for these things and stuff like that.
Cool. So when you are doing design exercises like that, are they more like conversations and thought exercises, or do you ever involve a whiteboard or sketching in both times when you've run the interview and times when you had, like in the Amazon example, when you've had to talk about how you would design an airport? What was that like?
It was whiteboard exercising where, I would walk them through my process, like how would I design the airport, what kind of things. So, collecting the questions, and then once I have all the answers, I would make notes of those things. So whiteboarding was an essential a part of the entire process, because that explains how do you think and how do you communicate your ideas. And how do you think about options? Because, I've seen many designers, they would just come up with one design and say, this is the solution. But I've seen like how Neil was, like he came up with multiple options and he spoke about the pros and cons of each in the whiteboard exercise. And he told me like why he chose this one design, because it covers all of the things, which should be there in the swimming pool. The same thing could be applied to, a mobile application or a desktop application or anything as a UX designer. Like you have to have multiple options when you are thinking about a problem. And then how do you go through it, and how do you, decide which one to select and why?
Interesting. Really, I mean, it's most of the times when we're interviewing people here in the office hours and we ask about the design exercises or the questions that are asked at interviews, it's so interesting to see that almost every single interviewee or someone in your position, they all emphasize how important it is to have that process and to, again, explore a completely new scenario that's not necessarily an app, not necessarily a digital product. It could be an airport, it could be a swimming pool, it could be something else. All right, that's really interesting. So let me ask a follow-up question to that. What are some of the red flags that you look for when you're just evaluating candidates? Of course, other than lack of process, other than those basic things that we covered already, what are some of the other red flags that you're usually looking for?
So did the person ask the right kind of questions is really important for me. And, most of the time I have had candidates, they would come and I would say, design this experience for me. They would just take the whiteboard because it's all about whiteboarding. They would just start drawing things. That is the red flag. I would never, proceed with a candidate like that who have never, clarified like what it is, because you don't know, there could be multiple entry points and stuffs. Just designing a solution is not what, a company would be looking for. So that's one thing. The second thing is defending your design and balancing it out is really important aspect of being a designer. You will have a lot of people who you have to justify your design to, right? Sometimes if you have to trade off, sometimes you have to, fight for it. Like I fought for Andencod, but I fought for Andencod with the right data, right? Had I not had that data, I would have fought for some time, and then I would have said like, okay, you know what, I have to trade off because I don't have the data to support my things. So as a designer, if you are able to, so when the design exercise is happening and I am asking the user those kind of questions like, why did you do that, why didn't you think about the other approach, I think there's a problem here. When I'm trying to critique the design, if the user is not able to take the feedback in a positive way, that is a very big red flag, because being a designer, you have to accept feedbacks and then be constructive about things, because maybe that person has a point. Listen to that person and then, give your solutions like, oh, I was thinking in this way, good that you told me about this, maybe I did not think about it, or let me go back and, think about more options or things like that. So I've had people, who would fight. There was a person, he was literally fighting because, he was defending too much of his design, but he would not let go any of the things. So yeah, so that was one big thing. So those are the two big flags I would be looking for.
Totally. And that's a good tip for students who are on the call and who might be looking for a job. Tell stories in your interviews that can demonstrate that you can take feedback and work it into your process. Okay, so we have a few more minutes, but I'm curious to hear where you think the UX field is headed in the next few years, like 3 to 5 years, especially with all these new different technologies and with robotics and artificial intelligence? Like, where are we headed? What are we doing?
So absolutely, we are not just limited to mobile and desktop applications or smart TVs. We are going way beyond that. Voice is the future. Artificial intelligence is definitely one thing. Augmented reality, virtual reality. I can see people investing a lot of time, effort, money into these products and technologies for a lot of things. So for example, simple example, like Microsoft HoloLens. These kind of technologies will start picking up, and now what you're doing just with the desktop, like automobile application and things, would evolve more than that. So I can imagine having like, let's say if you want to redesign your entire space, you can use HoloLens to do that, or use augmented reality to do that. So imagine Costco was redesigning their entire space and saying, hey, I want to redesign these things. How do I do that? Instead of breaking everything and starting from the scratch, maybe they can adopt a technology like HoloLens, where everything could be augmented in place and they can see where what will go. Or HoloLens could be used with voice for something different or something more advanced, like, okay, something is projecting on the screen and I'm using HoloLens to scroll through and stuff. So I can definitely see these latest technologies could be combined together, and these big players would come together to make something big. Like e-trials could be a big industry with Amazon and a lot of online shopping happening. People have never tried e-trials so far. It has always been trials. So I can think about things like these. So with a lot of technology evolving and adoption, voice, when I started working on Alexa, the first version of Alexa, we never thought, the kind of adoption and responses we would get. So with all that, I can definitely see, it's not just mobile or desktop, but technology is going way beyond that. Even cars, they are connected these days. People are talking about connected cars, autonomous and stuff like that. So we have a lot of opportunities, not only for mobile, web or desktop, but beyond that as well, to design those solutions. So as a voice designer, in addition to doing all of these things, like, the process and steps, I have to design the dialogue, like what the user could say and what the response should be. I design system personas, like what should my system be? It's not a machine, and things like that. So imagine, technology going into that, where, you are designing personas for augmented reality, and then you are defining that entire interaction, like how should it work and stuff.
Great. Thank you so much, Shyamala. I'm sure there's clearly so much knowledge that you've shared with us, and it's great to have you here today. So I really appreciate it on behalf of our host mentors and students here. I'm so glad that we can have you. As we wrap up, because I know people have to get going, I just wanted to send in a quick note to let everyone know that this will be our last office hours for the year. So it's a great end to this year, and I will see you guys again. For those of you guys wanting to join the next one, it'll be on January 2nd, and it'll be a general Q&A. So bring your questions, and I hope in the meantime everyone has a wonderful rest of the year, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.